Hello guys, welcome back. Here I have the M1 MacBook Pro and the M1 MacBook Air. So both of these are base models with 8 gigs of RAM. This MacBook Pro comes with the M1 chip with 8 core GPU and the 8 core CPU, and the MacBook Air comes with the M1 chip with the 8 core CPU and the 7 core GPU. So I've been using both the systems for about a week now, and I'm going to talk through the differences between both the systems to help you decide on which one to buy. Let's get started. So the first difference is in the screen. So there is one important difference that I have not seen any reviewers talked about it. As per Apple's website description, so the MacBook Air has 400 nits of brightness and the MacBook Pro screen has a maximum of 500 nits of brightness. So what that means is that when the computers are set to the maximum brightness, the MacBook Pro's display is slightly brighter than the MacBook Air, which is true. But there is more to it. What I mean by that is that the display on the MacBook Pro is much or significantly better than the display on the MacBook Air. I'm not pointing out the difference in brightness, but the clarity of the screen. This is very apparent when your brightness is set to 50% or lesser, and typically this is the brightness that your laptop will set to when you have turned auto brightness on if you're working from home. For example, if your light source is a floor lamp, or if you're working at bedtime, if you're working out of a night lamp, so typically the screen brightness or the laptop brightness will be set to around like 50% or lesser if you have turned auto brightness on. And in that brightness setting, the display on the Pro is much better, much easier on your eyes than the MacBook Air. So whenever I've used my MacBook Air, so I've always felt that the light hits my eyes, but I don't have that feeling with the MacBook Pro. It is so much easier on your eyes. So if you want the laptop with the best quality screen that is easy on your eyes, the MacBook Pro is the way to go. The next thing is the speakers. So as per Apple website description, so the MacBook Pro has a speaker with a high dynamic range, and the MacBook Air speaker does not have that. But based on my experience, these both sound almost identical. In fact, the sound from the MacBook Air, I felt the sound from the MacBook Air is a little bit higher than the MacBook Pro. But the vocals are slightly better in the MacBook Pro. But overall, I would call them a draw, and there isn't much difference between these two speakers. So you should be fine choosing either of the models. Moving on to the microphones, both the MacBooks have 3 beamforming microphones, but the microphones in the MacBook Pro is of studio quality. And based on my testing experience, the microphone on the MacBook Pro sounded significantly better than the MacBook Air. So for normal Zoom calls or normal audio conferencing, video conferencing meetings, you should be fine with both the mics. If you're into content creation like online course creation, if you're planning to use the microphone from your laptop, then it is better to go for the MacBook Pro. Else you should be fine with the MacBook Air itself. And with the MacBook Air, you can always add an inexpensive external microphone to improve your audio quality. This is an audio recording test in the MacBook Pro. This is an audio recording test in the MacBook Pro. This is an audio recording test in the MacBook Air. This is an audio recording test in the MacBook Air. The next difference is in the trackpad. So the trackpad in the MacBook Pro is actually slightly about 10% bigger than the trackpad in the MacBook Air. But based on my experience, that extra size doesn't help in any way, so you should be fine with either of them. So the next difference is the shape. So the MacBook Air is wedge shaped. So as you can see, it is thicker at the back and then it is very thin at the front, and this is so much easier to carry, and it's like so much easier to maneuver with compared to the MacBook Pro, which has a slab-like design wherein the width of the chassis is same at the back, and then it's like a rectangular slab. So it's not so difficult to carry this compared to that one, but I would always prefer the shape of the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro, and it's about like 100% heavier than the MacBook Air. So I wouldn't complain much about the weight factor, but I definitely prefer the MacBook Air's wedge-shaped design over the slab design of the MacBook Pro. The next difference is the touch bar. So the MacBook Pro comes with a touch bar and the MacBook Air comes with the physical keys. So based on my experience, the touch bar is of course fancy, but the actual keys on the MacBook Air is more functional. I personally prefer the functionality and the ease of use that is provided by the MacBook Air than the touch bar on the MacBook Pro. So for example, if you want to search an application, there's a search button in the MacBook Air. You can press on the search button and quickly find whatever you want, which is not there with the MacBook Pro. And for everyday tasks like increasing the volume or increasing the brightness, so in the MacBook Air it is one button, because you have the physical buttons there. You can increase or reduce the brightness with one touch, but with the MacBook Pro you have to do 2 clicks in order to reduce or increase the brightness or volume. So basically I personally prefer the physical buttons over the touch bar. And the next is the processor. So the MacBook Pro comes with the M1 chip, which has an 8-core GPU and an 8-core CPU, but the M1 chip in the MacBook Air, in the entry-level MacBook Air that I have here, has 8-core CPU and a 7-core GPU. So basically there's a 1-core lesser GPU than the MacBook Pro. As far as the performance is concerned, I have not found any difference between these two machines. Both are very snappy. So basically what I've done is that I've configured my email in the email app, and then I've installed WhatsApp, I've installed MS Office, I've installed Chrome, and I've also installed Final Cut Pro for video editing. And again, I don't do very heavy 10-bit HDR files. So all I do is 1080p or 4K 8-bit video editing, for which both of the machines are perfectly fine and very snappy. And when it comes to the regular usage, I have about 10 to 12 tabs open in Google Chrome and about 3 to 4 tabs open in Safari, and I have my WhatsApp open, I have Final Cut Pro open, and then yeah, that's pretty much it. So for this workload, I have not found any difference in speed between these two machines. Both are very snappy, and the RAM utilization is about like 6 to 7 gigs of RAM with all these applications open. And I think it's perfectly fine if your workflow also does something like this similar. Now coming to the recommendation part, I would buy the MacBook Pro over the MacBook Air if it is only for the display quality, the difference in the display quality. And that's a big deal for me because it's so easy on the eyes and I love the display. But the MacBook Air is slightly harsh. The whites are like, too bright. Sometimes I feel that it hits on my eyes. But I don't have any of those feelings with the MacBook Pro. That's the only reason that I would pick the MacBook Pro over the MacBook Air. But if that difference is not of importance to you, if it's not a big deal, then you'll be well served by the MacBook Air itself. And that's for today, guys. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please like it. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. Thank you and stay safe.